All right, what is up, everyone? Welcome back. March is in the books. My technically it is my best month ever, making just over $23,000. And to be honest, I really couldn't be happier with how this month went. Um, Normally, if you've been following me in the past, you know that most of my months have been like half promotions, right? Where almost half or more of my profits are from these OTC promotions. This month we really didn't have any, like none, no big promotions going on. So for me to pull out a new best month with really only mainly trading listed stocks is huge. Like 6 months ago, I would be lucky enough to just even make money unlisted, and now in this month, it's almost primarily all my profits. Like very little profits from this month are from OTCs, which is super super cool to see. So again, like always, we're gonna go, week by week. Um, it's gonna be a little bit shorter, I feel like, because I have gone over, this week right here, in a previous video. So I will link that in the description, or you'll see it pop up throughout the video. So yeah, let's get right into it. So ending off February, we had, this big day where, all the virus stocks kind of had their first red day. But that wasn't true, right? Only APT and Codex had that. There were actually a few stocks coming into March that still had not yet to pull back. And so that's what I was watching for. So the three of them were VXRT, IBIO, and NVAX here. You can see here on all the three of these going into March, we still had yet to have a red day, right? You may see red candles here, but the stock hadn't closed red yet. Same thing with IBIO. Two green days had a big wick, but still not a red day. And that's what happened the next day. And same thing with NVAX. NVAX had a huge gap down. So we're going to go through those trades. Unfortunately, a stock to trade will not let me go intraday back that far. It only lets me go back a month, and we're like 5 weeks back. So luckily, I do have the trades in here. So VXRT. So this was the first red day here. So on the actual first red day, not first red candle. So this day right here, March 2nd, um, it so it went red pre-market. So I took a starter. It actually opens back up green, but again, I was risking more towards above three over here from previous day's resistance and from pre-market resistance. We ended up going back red right out of the open, no morning spike. So I add again. You know, Now it's just a patience play, right? I now have my clear risk. If it can break over three, I'll cut it. If not, I'm going to let it work. And so we chop around a little bit. We hold red for the first 30 minutes, and eventually we start fading, right? Cover a little bit here, cover most of it, or I'm all out by here a little bit early, missed this panic. But again, at the end of the day, I pulled out $800 on this ticker. I'm not going to complain about it. Made money even on this day here when it was still a green day. So to pull out money like that, I can't complain. So pretty much similar thing with IBIO. If we go to the next trade here, IBIO here, um, not as well of trading on this one because I did chase. Like this ad right here is pretty bad. I should have saved this ad for shorting into this spike. But at the end of the day, I'm not gonna try to panic out into the spike either. Like my plan was still to risk off, this three level up here. So to just stick with the plan no matter what, whether my entries were bad. That's what I did. And so I'm happy that it at least played out that way. I let it, just slowly fade, finally faded red, started panicking, and I covered all into like this two area. And I made about 1100 on that one. So that was super cool. And then lastly, on the same day as well, was NVAX. Now you see this gap down here from it closed around $16 and opened at about 14. That was because in after hours they released a ATM. Briefly, for those of you who don't know what an ATM is, it's called an at the market offering, meaning for those companies that are dilutive, they can just sell shares at whatever price they want. And they're limited up to however many millions of shares to equals how many millions of dollars at the current price. So if we go to that trade here, let's see, I think it's this one. Yeah. So let me zoom in here. There we go. I move it around. Yeah. So clearly you see the huge gap down here. They released the ATM. And so I've actually seen a ticker. This stock in the past has done other ATMs. So I know generally how it reacts on this kind of news. This is where prior experience comes into play and is actually to my advantage. And so I knew pretty much it was gonna have a red day. Like when they announced the ATM, they were usually gonna sell their ATM or use their ATM right away, if it is effective, which it was. And so I shorted a little bit pre-market. Immediately it panicked out. I covered. And I just started, I kind of saw the stock super clearly, like I said, because I've had experience with this. So I really just started covering dips and shorting bounces, and I did that, two more times. It was small size. I wasn't going to try to be overly aggressive, considering it was, down 20-30% on the day. But I did feel comfortable reshorting it into bounces because I knew the ATM was on my side and made my edge that much better. So I did pull out another, I believe, 600 between all these pops, a couple $100 each way, and that pretty much was the bulk of these 2 days. Um, that's pretty much those. On the fourth, small loss. There was nothing really learned from there. On Thursday, Wednesday, I actually took a loss on, I believe, INO. Um, yeah, here we go. So INO was another virus play that kind of ran separate from all the others, right? Like it had its virus run, but it was a little bit delayed. Like all, NVAX, APT, Codex, they were all like pulled back. They had their top, they bounced or they failed. INO kind of had a little like it was like a late bloomer, right? It came later. Um, and so it was already up from, $4 now to 8 in 2 days. So I'm thinking, okay, like I want to be short. Like I want to try to give this short a shot. And so coming onto the fifth, we go red, right? And so I'm starting to shorten this pop. I actually short a little bit more into this pop, but you only see it after the fact. But in real time watching this, I just realized like this is holding. This is holding way too well. Clip plenty enough volume, and it squeezes. So I cut it, over this spike high. Unfortunately, lose $700, but I was willing to lose that much, and I greatly as I cut it, I avoided all this whole squeeze up to 10. So that was pretty much it for that week. Coming to Friday, I just felt like after taking that loss, I know like this thing's going way higher. I'm not going to even touch it, which was the right thesis. Squeezed from 10 up to 16 that same day. So just passed on that. Coming into next week now on the 9th, you actually, in this previous video where I went over this week, I showed you my INO trade. That was on this day right here. And so I actually have the chart so I can show you the entries and exits. But you see how this chart looks. We'll literally go to right here. See the same chart. So again, it was similar to what I talked about in the last video, how, waiting for these two multiple bounces is a huge sign to add right here for this ultimate panic. I didn't do that in this one, but it was something learning from this trade that helped me realize to make money on the APRN and WTRH trades in the last video because, seeing it bounce and fail twice, now holding under view up twice, and it actually offers these pops right here. This is where I should have probably added the most size, but regardless, I was still following my plan. I still had my entries that I liked in the strength and in these ones, and so we panicked, right? We just panicked right to red, super hard. Had my covers in different places, different spots. I then reshort the bounce. I cover into this pull, and then that was it. So ultimately pulled out, close to $4,000 on that. Any other trades that day? That was pretty much it. In terms of the 10th and the 12th, um, nothing, nothing that special. They were just small wins here and there. Nothing to really learn from that. So yeah, that's about it. Going into the third week, like I said, I made a video on this. You'll have something pop up, see it, or in the link in the description, you can watch that on how I, took losses on WTRH and APR on the way up, but then ultimately nailed them on the way down, making excellent 5-figure day. But I did not go over what happened on the 20th, what I will do. On the 20th was the next day of WTRH because APRN went red, but WTRH didn't, right? So WTRH went from 30 cents all the way up to $4. It closed the day before right here at around $2. Okay. Now you see here, it didn't go red, or it did go red very briefly right here for like a couple cents, but then bounced. So technically, it's very similar to IBIO and VAX, where it had a red candle, it's backside now, but it hasn't had a first red day, right? And so that tells me there's still more selling to be done. This could still go lower. So I didn't short any overnight, but I was fully prepared to reshort the next day, which was the 20th here. And so that's what I did. It closed around, I think, the mid 270s up here, maybe 260. And so I was fully prepared to get short because it was gapping down. I started shorting into all these pops right here, risking in the beginning, I'm having a very wide risk of 3 because I knew 3 from the previous day was very strong resistance right up here. You can see all these tops have been topped out, and even these support levels were previous support. So that was my first risk level, just to see at the open, because it easily could have spiked out the open, and I wanted to be prepared to add and still be comfortable risking 3. Now, as you can see, that didn't happen. I got started getting short, and they released an ATM. So very similar to NVAX, right? They released an ATM. It was effective. They now can start selling shares right at the market open. And so quickly I realized I was right. Like, I'm going to make money on this trade. I'm going to be able to add. And so that's exactly what happened. So it pulled. I then added even more size into this bounce right here, let it fade, stayed patient, let this, clearly there's no spike coming. So I just had to stay patient for the eventual crack. It pulled, I covered, made about 2 grand there. I did reshort small size into this bounce, but ultimately I just had very little size to make it really matter. And the fact that it kept holding this 150 level, I just took it off. Of course, in hindsight, if I stayed patient the rest of the day, I would have made more money. But again, it was small size. I was making money all the way down from where I was up in the threes. So to be down over 50% 2 days, I just wasn't going to be greedy. So I just took that. So yeah, that was today. Ultimately pulled out 3 grand. And so now we go in the fourth week. The fourth week here was a rough week, as you can see. Not my worst week ever. Losing 2 grand is not the end of the world. Like, it's kind of becoming almost a standard losing week if I do have one, which is okay. It's fine. But I was more upset with how I traded. Um, I briefly mentioned it, but I was kind of going through something in my personal life that was not healthy. That wasn't good for me personally, and I kind of ignored it. Right, it wasn't something that I didn't acknowledge, but after the 26th and 27th, I just ultimately realized, like, I'm letting it come into my trading, right? And so I have to just acknowledge that. And so the ways I realize that is I'll go over the trades with you. Um, Again, these days were just, they were just low ideal plays. Like, I just was trading things that really probably shouldn't have traded. Pulled a couple profits out, so I felt like I was doing good. And the reality is, once a real setup hit and I wasn't prepared for it, it just hit me hard. And so the first one was PRED. This runner was, again, another virus play, and goes from 40 cents up to over $1. And so now I'm looking for the first red day. I'm looking at this can get weak. I want to get short, and so I kind of got faked out here. I got faked out into this weak move out the open. It closed at, like, I believe 103, so right in the open it went red. I started shorting right at the open. I started shorting this bounce, and before you know it, we're squeezing. And I cut it. I looking in hindsight, risking this 103, this 107 level was not the best risk and wasn't a great risk at all. Like, it should have been, I should have been risking this previous day high of 117. But at the same time, risking well over 15 cents on a dollar stock, like, that's not what I want to do either. So I was in a very unprepared, kind of tough spot. And so I cut it right into the squeeze. Lost, I think I lost, how much did I lose? I think that was a couple $100, and then I proceeded to revenge trade when it cracked here. I was like, okay, it's going back red now. It's going to look weak, so I slammed back in. Um, did go back red, so I felt like I was right. Held the day lows, then squeezed back, so I covered again, losing even more money. I then proceeded to keep revenge trading and thinking that because it wasn't breaking down, I could long it. So I started longing in here. Clearly double tops, at the day's resistance. Didn't acknowledge that either. And then we start fading, and I have to sell when it goes back red for another loss. So ultimately on the day, I ended up like negative 1600 on this ticker alone. Um, Super frustrating. I believe I broke, well over 3 or 4, maybe even 5 rules on this ticker today. Between chasing, revenge trading, emotional trading, not making good trade plans, like, it was just all that. Um, and of course, look at the next day. The next day, it just gives it up very quickly. Like, this right here probably should have happened either here or here, but it didn't. For whatever reason, this stock was just going to be choppy and a pain in the ass. And because I was so emotional from this, I kind of made another mistake of just avoiding this. I didn't short this at all, which was another mistake because I could have made probably all my money back and a profit. But it is what it is. I just have to accept it and move on. Continuing my revenge trading and continuing this emotional trading is not going to help me. So I kind of tried to move on. I thought I could. But then we come into, Friday, and we have another red day. That was because I thought not being emotional with the same ticker would mean I could just move on. But the reality is I just took my emotions and brought it to a new trade. I just brought it to the next trade, which was Tilray. Um, this stock, this along with the other weed sector was bouncing. It bounced from now 4 up to $10 in about 2 or 3 days. So I was looking for the backside. I was looking for it to get short. It's not the most ideal thing. I usually prefer stocks that don't run in the past or do run in the past, but they're very they go really supernova and huge, where this has kind of been this is just a bounce. Like this is just a sector squeeze in the weed sector. This isn't like a virus play so it's a little bit less ideal. But again, it still is a pattern that I can short and trade. And so luckily I did avoid it all through here. I think I did actually make a couple $100 shorting this spike here, which was nice. Just a little practice on shorting like a parabolic there. But coming into the day, I for some reason just thought I was so overconfident about this being a red day. Like I just thought I was, again, I was being blindsided by emotions. I just thought like, okay, Pred's over, PRED's over with. I can just come in today and make my money back and be fine. As you can see, that's just not what happened. I started getting short right out of the open, which, if you've been a short seller long enough, like I have, shorting like right out the open usually is never a great sign. On OTCs, sometimes it is because OTCs are usually weak right away. Um, but with listed, there's a lot of dust, right? In terms of like this analogy, there's a whole crap ton of people, indecisive buyers and sellers trying to figure out which way it wants to go. And so normally trading right out the open is, not a gamble, but it can be so unpredictable, right? And so for me to just start slamming in because I saw it weak was just the biggest mistake, right? And I kind of knew it in the real time. I was like, oh, okay, this isn't the best decision, but I just ignored it, right? I ignored it. And of course, we squeeze. We squeeze super hard. And I didn't break my trading plan, but I had just a crappy trading plan. My trading plan was that, I was going to let it spike no matter how high it spiked. And then that new spike high would be my risk level, completely ignoring the fact that this could just spike way higher than I want it to. And now I'm down way more than I need to be. Like, my risk probably should have been, I should have just cut it over between 9 or 9:30. Um, these levels right here. But instead I said, no, 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 I'm going to let it go through those levels. I'm going to let it see where it tops out, and then that'll be my new risk. Now, did I plan for it to go all the way to 10 and then halt up for a volatility halt? Like, no, and that's the mistake. That's why this trade plan was so awful, because, it didn't account for that scenario. I just thought whatever the spike was going to go to, that would be the top out, ignorantly thinking that it wasn't going to actually go that high, which is a huge, huge mistake. And so now I think having me halted up, I'm down, well over $1,000, and I'm thinking like, if this goes any higher, I have to cut. I have to cut. I can't allow it to do this to me. I can't. I've already made a mistake of making an awful trade plan. I'm not going to let this happen to me. Now, fortunately, I did get a little bit bailed out. It did pull back weak, but again, I didn't cut. Right? Normally, right, and this is where the emotions start to build up. This is where I start to get greed and fear involved. Like now, I think I'm going to be right. Right now, I think that because of that huge squeeze and it just pulled super hard, now I can think to myself, okay, I don't have to take this loss. It's going to bounce and then it's slowly going to fade. And as you can see, that's not what happened, right? It bounced. Now, ultimately, this was going to be ultimate risk having over $10. I was going to be taking a loss that was much bigger than I wanted to take, but at the same time, I wanted to trade the chart and not my P&L. And so I did my best to do that. But ultimately, once it held, $9 twice now and started ramping up again, I cut it right in here. I was like, I don't need to wait. I finally got myself together and recognized like allowing my greed and my fear control my decisions. I'm not seeing clearly, and so I just cut it. Luckily, that cut saved me a few $100 from getting squeezed even further. So that was probably the good part about this trade. Um, but then again, I started revenge trading, right? Just thinking it was going to go away, it did not go away. Now seeing it top out at around 1050, 1060, I then proceeded to think I can now reshort into these lower highs and catch this fade. Now, in hindsight, I'm looking at it like this, right? I'm looking at it only right up to here. And so I'm thinking, you know, it keeps bottoming, right? It keeps on bottoming. It keeps making all these dips are getting supported. And I'm just thinking to myself, what are you doing? Like, again, I'm finally just getting the rationalization of like, you're not seeing clearly. Whatever you need to see in the market to make money, it's not happening today, right? Um, and so I cut it. I lost another $300 or so, ultimately missing this fade. Now, this is where it's like a double-edged sword, where it's like, do I listen and recognize that I can't see the market clearly, so I cut it, or do I try to stick to my trade plan, which is risking, over 10? And it's a little bit of both, right? I probably, either A, should have taken it off because I'm emotional, or be ready to add back. But ultimately, not just following my plan makes me even more emotional, right? I was taking so many losses and revenging trading for the past 2 days. Um, even knowing which rule to follow, was all messed up. So just totally, totally out of whack. And I called it a day. Like I didn't even watch the rest of the market day. I just knew I needed a break. The week luckily it was Friday, so the weekend was going to give me a great opportunity for that. And so that's that. Coming into this week, last 2 days of the month, felt so much better. Started seeing much more clearly, and I actually got to make some money back on Tilray. The next day it was gapping down, and so I did actually get short right into this spike, timed this pretty well here. I then added, once it started failing at 850, I then did take a small extra add. I did cut it at first, and then I realized like don't make the same mistake you made prior, where like I'm making these emotional decisions. I'm trying to play games with the stock, so I just took off a partial piece, then added a small piece back to the max size I wanted to take the max loss I needed to accept, and then it panicked, right? So just finally getting it together in that quick moment and just realizing, have a plan and stick to it no matter what with the size you're comfortable with, worked, which was good. Panic or covered into this panic here, and then that was pretty much it. In hindsight, shorting this bounce was a pretty sweet play, but I just kind of wanted to be done with the stock. I was like, finally, I read this right. I made money. Like, I'm just done with it. Forget about it. Um, in terms of anything else, so then this is when CYDY gets into play. CYDY, had a bunch of virus news. They've put out a PR like literally every day for the past week. Um, it's just, I don't know. I can't, I'm not going to do the research to find out if it's legit or not, but it just seems so scammy to me. This is an OTC. We know how 99% of these end. So I'm just going with the flow, see where it goes from now. But, I'm ultimately short bias on this ticker. But I actually made a lot of money long. And that's the beautiful part of being a flexible trader. Like, I'm reading price action. I ultimately don't really care how this ends. Whichever way it goes, like I'm ready to prepare. I'm prepared to, and ready to trade it. So coming into the 30th and the 31st, I fortunately missed longing overnight. I didn't even see the ticker on Friday because I kind of just took a break. But looking at it when it closed, I was like, wow, this would be a great long overnight. Just like super awesome, like clearly holding its levels, nice uptrend into the close on virus news. The news is going to spread over the weekend, and that's what happened, right? We have a huge gap up, and then right out the open, a massive spike. Um, if you do know how to watch level two, I was watching it up here. It did clearly was topping out at 350. Unfortunately, I didn't have any shares to short. Otherwise, I would have shorted here and kind of caught this pull. But then it started pulling so hard, I realized, okay, this is going to bounce, right? This is a great, liquid OTC, which we haven't seen in a very long time. And so when it panics like this, like there's a bounces coming, and usually it's really good. So that's what happened. I knew we likely would wash out to a new low a day, and that would likely be the bottom. And that's exactly what happened. We broke a new low day around 220, held support at 2, and then watching level 2, the bid started to firm up, the ask started to get thin, and so I got long. I sold a little piece right into the first bounce into the 230s. I then held to up to the 260s and sold the rest there. I ended up making around $1,000 on that long, so that was really sweet. Ignored it the rest of the day. Thought it was going to fade. I just wanted to. I decided I wanted to wait for it to close and just reevaluate the next day. But going into the last hour, I just was recognizing this intraday action and realizing like this isn't dead. This isn't dying. Right. This is clearly had its decent healthy pulls. It's now making higher highs. It's now kind of approaching this mid twos, even this like 280 resistance level now from the bounce high. Like this is healthy. And they, having now posted 2 PRs in a row, I'm not going to gamble on a third PR, but I'm just thinking they want to pump this stock. Like they want to get their, this is a momentum stock now. Like this is having a crap ton of volume. So I realized I want to be long. I did start longing. I wish I would have longed more in here. I was a little late to react to it, but I ultimately did start longing into these dips. I then longed a little more into this dip, and then we closed right into the 260s, which I was fine with. And then, of course, the next day, we do gapped up pretty big, and $3 was my goal to sell. So when we gapped up right at the open, there was a massive amount of sellers at 3. So I sold out. I said, forget it. It's at my goals. I don't need to play games and try to be greedy to get over 3. So I did lock in another, I think, 1,200 there, which was super sick. I then got short. Looking at the price action and having such a liquid OTC, you can get pretty good at telling, where resistance is at, where tops and bottoms are at. And right out the open, there was just so many sellers at 3. Like for it to get over 3, it was going to need so much volume and so many buyers that I was perfectly fine getting short and just risking a few cents for a very small loss. So I started getting short. I ultimately did end up getting right, or being right. I did cover a little bit in the dips. I then thought it was going to go red, but it held incredibly well. Like, it didn't even touch red green. It held a few cents higher, and then ultimately I realized, after this bounce and then it making a higher high here, I covered right into here, realizing, this isn't done. Again, being flexible, going back to the idea that I'm only short because I see a lot of selling and resistance, and then ultimately once I saw that it held green, and again, they put another PR out, which is why I gapped up. It's like that thesis of that they're still going to want to get this higher was still in my brain. So I'm super glad I cut it there. I ended up pulling out like $800 for a play that didn't even work, which is super cool. Then tried longing it again. So starting to get into a little bit over trading here. Held it through all of the day, but then ultimately just sold because it wasn't going anywhere. Um, and actually did panic into the close, which starting off April. Um, I guess I'll tell you about it. I did short a little bit overnight here, added more into April on the first day of April, but then as you can see, I got squeezed. So I did start off April with a unfortunate like $1,000 loss day, but I'm already up in profit for April so far. So I'll talk about the rest of these trades next month on the review. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Um, luckily in just these 2 days, wiping away all these profits or all these losses from the week before, was a good feeling, right? It just reassures with me that I can accept these bigger risks and start losing, as much as a grand a day or a couple grand a week, and I can come back from that. And that's something I think people don't recognize or realize is that, when you size up in risk, not only are you have to be more comfortable taking a bigger loss, but a bigger string of losses, right? You're, increasing your risk in just one trade is going to ultimately increase your potential drawdown across multiple trades because you're going to eventually lose three, four, five, maybe six times in a row at some cases. So, that's something I've definitely had to get more comfortable with. In terms of the reason why I wanted to do that is because I wanted to, for my 2020 goal, I wanted making $1,000 in a trade be very regular, like having that become my average win. And already, looking at my trades here, like that's already becoming a reality, in the first 3 months of the year. So that's super cool to see. But I have had to, start adjusting and accepting bigger risks as well. And so I do want to keep doing that going into April. And of course, the rest of the year, as long as these virus plays keep popping up and we're in this, unfortunate pandemic, the market's going to be pretty wild. So it's a lot of opportunity, but a lot of necessary risk management to make sure you're staying safe in this market. So that's pretty much it. I do want to maybe share my thoughts on the whole pandemic. It is pretty unfortunate for a lot of people, which is really, really a shitty situation. But ultimately, at the same time, for a lot of people, um, it's at first I always saw it as a very negative thing. Like, we have to stay at home, we can't do much. Like, it's very boring. But ultimately, I realized this is kind of an opportunity. I rather look at it in a positive way than a negative way. And the reality is, we have more time than ever to really do whatever it is we said we were going to do, right? Whether it was, something as silly as learning a new language or learning this or learning that, reading that book, we now have more time than ever to do that. Of course, we can't go outside, which again, yeah, is not the best thing ever. But I was talking to a buddy of mine, and we were just talking about how this could be seen as something positive rather than negative. Um, and he goes, yeah, like, you can either, once this is all over, you can either come out ahead or you can be left behind. And that spoke volumes to me. It's like he's absolutely right. Obviously everyone's in different situations and everyone has maybe a tougher situation than someone else. But ultimately, there's something you could probably be doing right now to get ahead. And for me right now, it's trading, right? Luckily, trading has allowed me to really take advantage of this market. Um, and so I'm improving myself. Like I said, I've become better at listed trading than I ever have before. So that's one area. Another area is like I've got two or three books right here that I want to read and get through that, and I can pound through those books even faster now because I can because I have more time. And so there's just so many things I think that you can look at a positive light out of it rather than the negative. And so for you guys listening, it's like more time to study, right? I'm sure you have more time than ever to study and become a better trader. So once this is all over, you could be fully prepared for whatever happens. That's just a little quick thing I wanted to share. Just keeping positive and ultimately realizing this is an opportunity and not necessarily a victimization of this unfortunate situation we're all in. So, anyways, thanks for watching, guys. I will see you guys next time. Later.